Good afternoon to everybody. A splendid warm welcome. Esteemed Principal of Ramona Degree College, distinguished resource persons of the today's international webinar, learned participants, lover of the topic, distinguished veteran principals of Naibor College of Odisha, and Reverend Dr. Santanu Kumar Pani sir, and our guide Dr. Surendra Kumar Biswal sir, Head Department of History, Srinivas Degree College, Mangalpur, and all staff of my college, dear and dear students and technical team members. It is delighted that Ramona Degree College is organizing an international webinar as the titled "The Sources of the History of Odisha, Archaeological, Literature and Foreign Accounts." I feel deemed privileged to introduce respected guests for the webinar on this auspicious occasion. I would like to say that our beloved and dynamic principal, Mistress Jayanti Naik Madam, she is an instrumental force behind this team. She has proved her excellency in the field of second language Sanskrit. A lady, but just, and woman of honesty for excellence. Sanskritization is the keynote of her character. And through Brahminical chatting of 5 months in the classroom, for her support gives us huge amount of pleasure to organize such type of international webinar under the Department of History, Ramona Degree College. So I would like to beloved Principal Madam to deliver your welcome address to grace the occasion. Please, Madam, proceed on. Madam?
Thank you, sir.
Okay, madam.
Good afternoon. Welcome to all participants and distinguished speakers. Professor Basant Kumar Mahanta, Acting Head, Department of Sociology and Anthropology, College of Business and Social Science, Habitat Eritrea, Africa. Dr. Vinod Bihari Satpathy, Assistant Professor from Government College for Women Surgery. Dr. Manas Kumar Das, Assistant Professor, Department of History, PK College, Jalesur. Today we are going to discuss webinar topic on sources of the history of Odisha, foreign accounts, literature and archaeology. History is the study of life in society in the past, in all its aspects in relation to present developments and future hopes. It is the story of man in time, an inquiry into the past based on evidence and an inquiry into the inevitable changes in human affairs in the past. In the ways these changes affect, influence the patterns of life in the society. It is a science in the sense that it pursues its own techniques to establish and interpret facts like other natural science, such as the physics and chemistry uses various methods of inquiry, such as observation, classification, experiment, and formulation of hypotheses, and analysis of evidence before interpreting and reconstructing the past, and follows the scientific method of inquiry to find out the truth. Studying history enables us to develop better understanding of the world in which we live, building knowledge and understanding of historical events and trends Especially over the past century enables us to develop a much greater appreciation for current events today. Really, history cannot give us a program for the future, but it can give us a full understanding of ourselves and of our common humanity so that we can better face the future. Any subject of study needs justification. Its advocate must explain why it is worth attention. Most widely accepted subject, and history is certainly one of them which attract many people. Historical studies are less tangible, sometimes less immediate than those that stem from other disciplines. It gives us past information of people, society events, problems, and help to attempt to understand them and provides us with a sense of identity by understanding where we came from, sense of context for our lives and existence. It helps us understand the way things are and how we can better organize and manage our societies for the benefit of all. Simply, I want to say three things. Number one, history helps us understand people and societies, contributes to moral understanding and provides identity, essential for good citizenship and useful in the world of work. Many thanks the Department of History to organizing international webinar with a good topic. Before concluding my talk, I want to say the people without the knowledge of their past history, origin and culture are like trees without roots. Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you. Thank you, madam, for your nice presentation for the today international webinar. As you are in the field of Sanskrit, but today your presentation regarding history to my mind and out. Thanks, madam. Thank you, the history department. Holy land of God and goddesses, temple and shrines, hill and mountains have been meeting ground of the various sects, faiths and ranging from long-standing coastlines to inland antiquities. Archaeological sites, rock edicts, heritage, old regionals, literatures, inscriptions, and valuable reminiscences. So it needs a thorough examining for analyzing comprehensive history of ancient past. History is beacon of special wisdom and model of social sciences requires revitalizing. So far as the topic is concerned, esteemed resource persons explore their ideas to the limelight. So I feel it deemed privilege to introduce the respected resource persons for today's auspicious occasion at the outset. He, who is chief speaker of today's webinar, he is the acting head of the Department of Sociology and Anthropology, College of Business and Social Science, Adikari, Eritrea, Africa. Namely, Professor Kumar Mohanto. He has earned name and fame in his 40 years teaching experience on his services and contributing several papers in national, international, journal, and books. He has formed as the area of study is archaeology. I hope as fellow batch speech pertaining to the topic will create a race of academic pursuits. Professor Basanta Bhansar is requested to present your intervention Professor Basanta,
लिंक भूल दीजिए मते नाहंती ସେଥିପାଇଁ ଆସୁନି
Mr. Basanta, can you listen me? Am I audible to you, sir? Basant sir, Professor Basant sir from South Africa. Can you listen me, sir? Okay. Due to some technical problem, I hope that the sir has not joined with us, and we will try as far our best to joining with Professor Basant sir. So now another resource person who has consulted the today's webinar is Dr. Vinod Bihari Satpathy, who is working as assistant professor in history at Harohilasan Government College for Women, Puducherry, that is in Pondicherry. He is an Odissan by birth, but non-Odissan by profession. Though he is a man of innocence, but he is serious scholar in the field of archaeological research, who has arrested scores of awards in the teeny age of his service period. May Lord Jagannath sprinkle his blessing to him to much ahead from point to point, as he was gathered a lot of mastery over the foreign accounts. I hope thought and analysis for his topic will add new dimension for the lovers of the participants, teachers, and students. So, Professor, Assistant Professor Vinod Bihari Satpathy sir, you are requested to offer your balanced talks webinar on the topic literary. Those three topics on this webinar. I request you to offer your wise thought regarding archaeological sources and foreign accounts. So I welcome sir. Please, Dr. Vinod Bihari sir. Sir, can you listen me, sir? Basant sir, Vinod sir.
Hello, am I audible?
Sir, yes.
Good afternoon and namaskar to all. Respected Principal, Remuna Degree College, Remuna, Mrs. Jayanti Nayak Madam, respected Mr. Jayant Kumar Pradhan, Head of the Department of History, Remuna College, Remuna, respected Professor Basant Kumar Mohanta, College of Business and Social Science, edit area. I think there is some technical problem. He is unable to join us. Respected Dr. Manas Kumar Das, lecturer in history, DK College, Jaleshwar. Faculty members and students of Remuna College, Remuna, and my dear audience, friends. Honestly speaking, sitting far away from Odisha, around 1400 kilometers from Odisha, it is a great pleasure for me to be present with you on this virtual platform to deliberate on some particular aspect of Odisha history. It is like home away from home for me. I am thankful to the organizing committee for inviting me to express my views and ideas before this majestic virtual gathering. I am thankful to the organizing committee, particularly I am very much thankful to Mr. Jayant Kumar Pradhan sir for bringing me to this platform and selecting such a suitable topic for deliberation. The topic is very much essential for the student and the scholar of history of Odisha. I am told to speak on the foreign notices of Odishan history, and now as I am looking into this, I think there is some technical problem, and because of that, our speaker is unable to join us. Maybe he will join. In case he will not join, in course of my talk, I'll be briefly speaking on archaeological sources of Odishan history, if you permit me, sir. So, my talk, as I told you, my topic is about the foreign aspect of Odishan history, foreign sources on history of Odisha. So, to begin with, as friends, as you know, once a great historian R.G. Collingwood has said that history is the study of res geste. Res geste means action of human or action of human being that are done in the past, and history do not study anything that is not related to human. If I am correct, then please agree with me. And so for the study of this human action, historians use different type of evidence or fact and sources of the past, which are, according to another historian, Alan Munslow, is the raw material of history industry. If history is an industry, then the raw material is evidence, and the man or the technician is historian, and the product is history. So according to Alan Munslow, the evidence is the raw material in the history industry is manufacturing process, and the history is all about the process of translating or transforming this evidence into fact. This evidence makes history different from other branches of inquiry, and this evidence is also called as sources of history. To be very precise, we are going to discuss these sources of history, and for information of my student audience, we all know that historical sources broadly divided into two major categories. Documents, that is, documents are greatly written, mostly generally written, and relics, whereas relics are archaeological. Again, these documents and relics are again categorized into primary and secondary sources, as it is taught to us during our research days. It was taught to us that original document remains, which are the first witness of a fact, are termed as primary sources. And it is not always possible to obtain primary evidence, and at times the historian have to rely on secondary sources. So the sources of information transmitted by one who was neither a participant in nor an eyewitness of the original event are called secondary sources. In other words, we can say that secondary sources, a middleman comes in between the original witness and the present consumer, that is historian. So this is two different type of sources so far as research is concerned, and history also we use both the sources. So far as history of Odisha and sources are concerned, we know that history of Odisha, as we know, friends, Odisha, as we know, is located in the buffer zone between the north or the Uttara Patha and south, the Dakshina Patha, is having a rich historical past. And new researchers beginning with the 19th century, during the colonial era, since then till date, heralded new epochs of Odishan history with discovery of new sources. Intensive research in various areas during the last 2 centuries gathered different type of sources for reconstruction of history of province. Based on these sources, many scholarly work have come up in the recent past. So the present talk, my talk, will be on foreign notices, and in case our chief speaker will not join, briefly I will be also speaking on archaeological sources in general. responsible or helping historian for reconstruction of Odisha history. So, to be very precise, when we discuss about foreign sources, it is necessary to define this. So, what is foreign source or what is foreign notice? Foreign account, rather we can say, means record of foreign historian, geographers, and travelers in a given time of history. It also includes the writing of historian based on the account of original travelers. Some writers were there, or some foreign accounts are there, referred Odisha, where the writer never ever visited India nor Odisha, but they collected their information from the original travelers and they narrated those down. And so far as foreign account, this travel account is concerned, as we know that writing and travel are always intimately connected. The general public was greatly interested in the stories of faraway places, so people used to write at least to appease or please the people, please the common people or general reader. So most often, when in case of historical foreign accounts, we found that the traveler did not record his own story, but told it to someone else or addressed to someone. Like even when we discussed about Marco Polo, when Marco Polo returned back, he spoke in the journey in a prison. He told his to someone, and that someone can record that down. So, travel literature evolved through time, and it contains information on the dictionary for pilgrims, roads, and railways, list of entities, to condition of different condition of places visited. So, throughout historical time, travelers visited India and traveled over its landmass. So far as Odisha is concerned, no traveler came to Odisha by targeting it as their destination. Their coming was an incident or accident of their traveling in India, or it was rather a part of their traveling in India, we can say. So let us, what I am going to do is giving you a brief survey of foreign account or notices from the beginning till 18th century. So this is like a survey. So first of all, I begin with the Greco-Roman tradition. So as you know, friends, for its reconstruction of history of ancient part of Odisha, some foreign sources are very important. So like in other part of India, the Greco-Roman tradition also very much helping historian to reconstruct history of ancient Odisha. So whenever we discuss about or talk about Greco-Roman tradition, the name of Megasthenes appears first before us. And as we know, Megasthenes came to the court of Chandragupta Maurya, and there he witnessed, stayed some time and returned back to his homeland. There he wrote this famous Indica. Even though Indica was lost to us, subsequent historian of Greece and Rome, they noted down or quoted Megasthenes in different occasions. So in the 19th century, when these manuscripts were collected, many historians of West, they tried to disclose the fact written in those accounts of ancient or classical Greco-Roman historian. And so from that, historians used to collect. I'm not the student of history used to collect data about the respective area. So far as Odisha is concerned, Megasthenes mentioned Odisha, then Kalinga, part of Odisha was known as Kalinga, is mentioned as Kalinge by Megasthenes in his Indica. Megasthenes states that the tribe which dwell by the Ganges are the Kalinge, and they are nearest to the sea. Secondly, Megasthenes also spoke about the extent of Kalinga by writing that a territory called Gangeridam Kalingaram Regia, having Ganges on its eastern side, is located toward the east of Magadha, and that is what he has written. And simply he mentioned the because then Kalinga was located just east of Magadha, so he probably mentioned that after collecting this data from someone. The next important historian of Greco-Roman tradition was Pliny, and so far as Pliny is concerned, he was a man of 1st century CE. He was there during the Pax Romanica rule of Augustus, Roman Emperor Augustus Caesar. So he wrote a book on natural history, and unfortunately he completed his work in 77 CE, and he died in 79 CE when the famous Mount Vesuvius erupted at Pompeii, and this man also was buried there. And it was informed by his nephew Pliny the Junior to Ptolemy, or some other historian when they were writing this. So Pliny, in his natural history, It was a book present three divisions of Kalinga known as Gangerides Kalinge, Mako Kalinge, and Kalinge, out of which the middle division is mentioned as Mako Kalinge.
हाँ
Then Pliny says the royal city of Kalinga is called Parthalis, and Parthalis is many times they identify with the Anantapura. So Pliny also gave the location of Odro territory in his natural history. And remember this, Pliny did not come to Odisha or India. He was collecting this data from the fellow Greek either mercenaries or travelers who traveled to east, and they Pliny collected those data from them. Pliny is mentioned that Oretus inhabited the country where Mount Melius stood. Oretus is probably Odro, and Mount Melius has been identified as Mola near Pallahara. Pliny associates the Mount Melius with the people called Mundis, who were probably the same as the Mundas and the Sabaras inhabiting the is please unmute that someone who is.
এটা জয়েন কর তুমি কিছু করিনি
So, Pliny reference to Dantapura and Kepekaling inform us that Kalinga extended from Godavari in the northeast.
Mute your audio.
So next in line of Greco-Roman tradition was Ptolemy. Ptolemy wrote a book called Guide to Geography in English. That book was translated to English as Guide to Geography. Original name of that book was Geographica Hypagesis, and in 2nd century CE in 8 volumes. And he mentioned about Odisha. He was a Roman citizen of Egypt who wrote in Greek. So he was a Roman citizen of Egypt, and he used to write in Greek. And he is famous Greco-Roman geographer. Ptolemy in the 2nd century CE refers to several ports of Odisha like Odisha, that is Kalinga, like Nani Kraina, that is a scholar identified that with Puri, Katika Drama is Katak, Kannagara with Konarak, and river mouth Manada with Mahanadi, and Dosaran with Baitarani, Adams with many other rivers, and Minagara with Jajpur, and probably Kosambo with Pipili or Balasore. Pliny's work subsequently, when it was this work was edited, historian
কিছু করিনি কিছু করিনি কিসব বন্ধ ইয়ে করো
so diamond Ptolemy also mentioned about the diamond mining seems to have been carried out near the town of Kasa at the mouth of river Adamas, and a historian identifies generally with that Adamas with modern Ib river which meet Mahanadi near Hirakud. So in the territory of Sabarai, he mentioned the territory of Sabarai probably, and that probably Sabarai is Sambalpur. And in 18th century, Thomas Motte also informed us about the diamond mining of Sambalpur. Ptolemy also mentioned about
Surendra sir, please mute your audio. Surendra
And-
sir, please mute your audio.
And another Greco-Roman traditional work which is very important so far as the history of Odisha is concerned is Periplos of Erythraean Sea of an anonymous writer that too also belongs to 1st century CE. And that book, in the Periplos of Erythraean Sea, the author referred about Dosarne, and a scholar identified that Dosarne, and he mentioned that Dosarne was very famous for ivory product, and a scholar identified Dosarne with Odisha. And this Periplos of Erythraean Sea also informs us about the important industries that developed in Kalinga during 1st century CE. He also mentioned about the pearl fisheries as a industry in Odisha or Kalinga in those days. Next to the Greco-Roman tradition come the Chinese sources and travel account. So far as Chinese sources is concerned, many Chinese travelers came to India, and in course of time, because Odisha was then also an important land of Buddhism, they also traveled or somehow learned from different sources about Odisha. Among them, Wensang is very famous, and he traveled into Odisha and visited different part of then Odisha, and he mentioned all these things in his work CUK, that is travel into the Western world. And this Chinese pilgrims Wensang is concerned, he visited Odisha around 638 AD and gave an account of territory named Udra or Ucha, and he stated that he also discussed about the geographical extension or distribution of Ucha, about its capital. And according to Wensang, the people of Ucha were very aggressive, and their language was also different than the language of other Indian, particularly the North Indian. And Wensang also mentioned about existence of 100 Buddhist monasteries in Odisha, inhabited by tens and thousands of Buddhist monks. Wensang also referred to an important seaport town of ancient Odisha called Chelitalo, and there is still controversy and debate among historians regarding identification of that Chelitalo. He also mentioned about two great monasteries of Odisha. One is Kusupokili or Puspagiri Vihara, and that too also historian of Odisha are searching about its original location. And in this way, even Wensang also left an interesting account related to the commercial activity of people of Odisha. We learn from account of pilgrim Wensang that Ucha, Rudra, Pamboda and Kalinga are different part of the then Odisha, or different political distance of the then Odisha. He also mentioned about Kosala. Then following Isang, Wensang, Ising arrived in India. And for your information, I would like to inform you that Ising was a boy of 12 years when Wanchuang or Wensang returned back to China in 645 CE. And he heard about Wensang, and he was inspired. At the age of tender age of 12, Ising made up his mind to follow Wanchuang path, illustrious example, and he finally started his journey in 671 and reached India and arrived at Tamluk in 673 CE. Ising mentioned about Kalinga and a separate different Kalinga located in the Hindu-Buddhist kingdom in central Java. But Ising, along with also provided along with Wensang several accounts of Buddhism in Odisha. Particularly, he provided information about Gautamiputra Satakarni construction of a Buddhist monastery at Porimalagiri at Polo Molokili in Kosala, where he informed us that Nagarjuna propagated his Madhyamaka philosophy or middle path. Another Chinese account, which is very important so far as history and Middle Age early medieval period is concerned, particularly Odisha is concerned, that is the Chu Fanchi, a book written by Chou Ju Kua in 13th century, referred to Kalinga sea-going vessel or Kalinga sea and their system of trade organization. He also mentioned about different type of sea, very powerful sea of Kalinga that used to go to China. This another important Chinese source which referred about Odisha is the 14th century Wang, a man, 14th century Chinese man Wang Ta-wan. He informed us about the product of Kalinga or Odisha, which was used to be a part of trade relationship or trade with China. So he mentioned that Ucha or Odisha was famous for rice and kingfisher feathers, bee box and fine cotton stuff. He mentioned that because of the cheapness of living in Odisha, 9 out of the 10 person going there for trade, means coming to Odisha for trade, is used to stay back in Odisha. It means in those days also Chinese used to came to Odisha, and there was no animosity. Probably in those days they used to stay back in Odisha. So Odisha is still a cheap place in comparison to other part of India and the world. So he also mentioned about the Odishan currency in those days, whatever it was then. Then following the Chinese path, some Tibetan also came to Odisha, India, and in course of their travel in India, they also came to Odisha. And so among them, the most important one is Taranath, who in the 16th century was a Lama in the Janang school of Tibetan Buddhism, and he wrote a book called Buddhism, a History of Buddhism in Odisha, India, and he provided several information on condition of Buddhism in Odisha particularly. He referred to the construction of Ratnagiri monastery in those days, and he also mentioned about Asoka and many other aspects of ancient Odisha. Particularly, he mentioned that Odisha is the birthplace of Mahayana Buddhism, and its earliest text, Ashta Sahasrika Prajna Paramita. He spoke about several great teachers such as Chandra Goswami and Gomin and Dharmakirti as the resident of Buddhist monastery in Odisha. He, while giving the history of 84 Siddha, Taranatha described Uddiyana as a country consisting of 5 lakh towns and divided into 2 kingdoms, and that Uddiyana is none other than Odisha, as identified by some historian. So another Tibetan book is Blue Annal, which was completed in 1476 and written by Go Lodshwa Jonufel, and that book that is a historical work of Tibet, and this man Go Lodshwa Jonufel spoke about the condition of Buddhism in Odisha. Then another last one was another book called Pak Sam Jon Jan. Those friends who are research scholar of Buddhism, they might have know about this book. This book, this Pak Sam Jon Jan, is also otherwise known as History of the Rise, Progress and Downfall of Buddhism in India. It was authored by Sumpo Kanpo in 18th century. He visited Odisha, and he also provided, but whether he visited or not, I don't know, but he provided information about Buddhism in Odisha, and particularly Uddiyana as a place of Tantric Buddhism. He provided us information. So these are some Chinese and Buddhist, then the Greco-Roman, then the Chinese and the Tibetans account. Next to these people, some Arabian or the Muslim chroniclers or Muslim people also, travelers also came to India, and Muslim geographer also informed us referred to Odisha in their sources. Most important among them is the 9th century Ibn Khudadbi, a Persian geographer. In his Kitab al-Masalik wa al-Mamalik, the book of roads and kingdom, mentioned about Ursin, situated on the sea coast, and many historians, particularly Russian scholar Minorsky, identify that Ursin with that of Potradesa or Odisha. He also mentioned about this. Ivan Khudadbin also mentioned about this Kalinga as Kanja, Pongada, this Kalinga, Pongada, and Udra Desa. Then another Persian geographical text, an anonymous author called Hudud al-Alam. The book name is Hudud al-Alam in Persian language, written toward the close of 10th century. He also mentioned the territory called Ursitin, and that a particular text referred to the industry of pre-Ganga period of Odisha. Then came the celebrated or the father of Indology, Al-Biruni. Al-Biruni accompanied Muhammad Ghazni and stayed back in India, and he wrote his famous work India or Tehqiq Mali Hind, where he referred to a territory called Udra Bisau, located around 50 farsak toward the sea in the south from the tree of Prayag. So he mentioned about Udra Bisau at the same time. So this is not a coincidence that Al-Biruni was writing this Udra Bisau in his Tehqiq Hind in 1025. And in 1023, in the Tirumalai inscription of Rajendra Chola, same Udra Bisau is mentioned. How he defeated or conquered Udra Bisau is he mentioned in his Tirumalai inscription. Then another Muslim chronicler or travelers is Muhammad bin Amir Wali. This 17th century travelers, Muhammad bin Amir Wali, is an important person who visited Odisha. He visited Odisha and stayed here for almost 2 years in the 17th century, and he was from Afghanistan, and he elaborately discussed about Jagannath temple, the Sun temple at Konark, even Karunasagar Behera in his Konark Heritage of Mankind mentioned about this author, this famous Muslim chronicler of Afghanistan. He also mentioned about the people of Kotak and their lifestyle, and provided a comprehensive report of his visit in the Odisha. Of course, by that time European had already arrived. So beside, next to this European traveler came this Muslim traveler, came the European travelers, and simply I will tell some of the name of their works in this brief discussion. So first among these European travelers was the Prior Odorin, who came to Odisha in India, particularly Odisha in 1321. He was a Franciscan missionary of Pordenone, who visited India in 1316 and 1316 around, and some 20 years after Marco Polo. And in his own account of 13 and 21, he reported about the Rath Yatra, first information of Rath Yatra in a foreign, I think it is there in the prior Odori account. He had mentioned about how the devotees threw themselves at the wheel as sacrifice to the Lord, allowing themselves to be crushed. Then following them, traveler who visited Vijayanagara also, from incidentally they mention about the history of Kalinga or condition of Odisha, because then there was continuous war between Vijayanagara and Odisha in the last phase of Gajapati dynasty. Among them, for now, Numich and Domingo Peace are famous. Domingo Peace and for now Numich, they mention about the war between Prataparudra Deva and Krishnadeva Raya, and how Virabhadra, the son, this prince of Odisha, was captured by this this Krishnadeva Raya is also mentioned, and how Krishnadeva married a princess of Odisha also mentioned by these two. So incidental references are there in the account of these travelers, Portuguese travelers who visited Vijayanagar, but they mostly rely on second-hand information, which sometimes mislead them. Next to this came Duarte Barbosa in the early 16th century. He was a Portuguese traveler who came to India in the beginning of 16th century, and he traveled from Vijayanagar to Odisha by land and informed us in identifying the political boundary of Odisha during that period. When he came to Odisha, at that time Prataparudra Deva was ruling over Odisha and Krishnadeva Raya was at Vijayanagar. About Odisha, Barbosa mentioned that Odisha was inhabited by gentle means the Hindu. Even he also called the king of Odisha as gentle, and he also criticized the king of Vijayanagar because he was fighting with the king of Odisha. So he said that he also mentioned about the Muslims, that is how few Muslims are staying in Odisha, and mostly most of the people are Hindu, was mentioned by Barbosa. Then Caesar Frederick, following Duarte Barbosa, Caesar Frederick was a Venetian traveler. Out of curiosity, he traveled to east, and he came to Odisha by accident, as I told you in the initial part of my talk. His ship was going to Saint Tom from Malacca, but the wind was so contrary that they could not control the ship, and after 40 days in traveling in voyage in the sea, they lost in the sea, and finally there is a land closer to the kingdom of Odisha. According to Frederick, Odisha was a fair and strong kingdom where law and order were so strict that one person could travel with gold in it. So he was speaking about the strictness and simplicity of the people of Odisha. He mentioned that Cuttack was the seat of Odisha ruler. That he also mentioned about, provided the information that how Odisha was 16 years before conquered by the Sultan of Bengal, and subsequently in later part of 1509, Odisha was again occupied by Mughal king of Agra and Delhi. Then Ralph Fish came in the late part of 16th century. Ralph Fish belonged to those group of pioneer Englishmen who came to India with royal message for establishing trade activity in India, and he discussed about Hijili, a port of Odisha, and he mentioned that from Hijili many ships were laden with famous rice, cloth, sugar, long paper, butter and other products, and sell to Nagapattinam, Sumatra, Malacca and others. And if you remember, just before this, when we discussed, I was telling you about the Chinese account. The same in a Chinese account, the same thing is mentioned that from port of Odisha, rice used to be export. So this is a continuation. So Odisha was a separate kingdom, and the king was a great friend of stranger, was mentioned by Ralph. Probably he was welcomed and treated properly by the then ruler of Odisha. Then John Huygens van Liechtenstein arrived following the Ralph Fish, and he was a Dutch by part, and he authored a book called Itinerario. In his Itinerario, he provided a vivid information regarding the geography as well as directional route of different places of Odisha as well as India. He mentioned about the cart festival of Puri and Jagannath temple. Then some French also arrived in Odisha, in India, during their sojourn in India. They also came to Odisha, like Thévenot, 1666. He was a French citizen who mentioned Odisha and Bengal as one province. and also mention about the famous temple of Lord Jagannath, Jagannath Pagoda. Then Sebastian Manrique, a Portuguese missionary, traveler, came to Odisha in 1636. He visited Pipili, Harishpur and Puri, and he provided beautiful information about Puri and particularly Balasore. He was speaking about Pipili. He said that Pipili was an inland port situated about 10 miles west of mouth of the river Subarnarekha. And he also mentioned about Mayurbhanj kingdom extended to the sea, and the port of Pipili was within the territory of Mayurbhanj. So then Mayurbhanj kingdom, it was under Mayurbhanj, Pipili. So the most important temple in Kingdom of Bengal, according to Manrique, was Jagannath Temple, which stand at the seashore, as he mentioned in his book. And particularly so far as Balasore is concerned, he mentioned that he visited the city of Balasore and Jaleshwar and mentioned about the guest house in Jaleshwar city. Probably then, because it is located on the highway between north and south, Jaleshwar had some great guest house, which was vividly described by this Sebastian Manrique. Then famous William Burton arrived, about whom Paramananda Acharya also wrote a beautiful article. While collecting data, I came across his book article in OHRJ. So William Burton, an English citizen, he came to India in 1632. He visited Odisha in the May of 1633 and continued to be there up to November 1633. He for 7 months he stayed here. And he visited Cuttack and Puri in 1633 and provided information regarding life of people, the lifestyle and behavior of the people of Odisha, as well as the wild animal of people of Odisha. So, Burton informed that people of Odisha are notably ingenious and industrious, but barbarous and idolatrous in nature. He described the people of Odisha as backward, illiterate, barbarian, idolatrous, and sexual pervert, besides being ingenious. But that doesn't mean that is a wrong perception. Sometimes some type of observation content in good historical account of these and Odisha. So there is also another vital piece of information regarding the time machine, that is time-keeping machine, which was he found located in the near the palace of ruler of Cuttack. So he also visited the temple of Lord Jagannath on a company business, and he beautifully gave a detailed account of Lord Jagannath temple. Then Thomas Browry came in later part of 17th century. In his dictionary of English and Malayo, he discussed about Odisha. He mentioned Odisha as Orixa, which was a Portuguese version of Odisha, and its inhabitant he called as Uria. Then he also mentioned about the cart festival of Jagannath, prevalence of caste system in Odisha, and he also mentioned about the behavior of Brahmins, for which temple of Lord Jagannath is very notorious. Behavior of Brahmin long back in 17th century, how the Brahmins used to misbehave with people, he mentioned. And he also described Devadasi tradition, and he also mentioned that about the prevalence of Sati system and how the people, Brahmins, the Mughal rulers and Muslim governors, not trying to put an end to that Sati, heinous crime of Sati, was also criticized by this man. Then Tavernier arrived in Jean-Baptiste Tavernier following Browry came to Odisha. He came to Odisha at the time of Aurangzeb rule, and he was a Frenchman. He wrote a book and he gave a detailed description of idol of Jagannath and Puri. He also mentioned about Sambalpur and about the diamond mines of Sambalpur. Imagine, Ptolemy also mentioned about that. Then Tavernier is also mentioning about that, and subsequently Thomas Motto in his account also mentioned about these diamond mines of Sambalpur. Then Francois Bornier came in his travel in the Mughal Empire. He came to India during the days of Shah Jahan, and he came to Odisha and he visited the temple. He stayed there for many days, and he mentioned about the car festival used to be about Devadasi tradition, and about the people, about the temple, and particularly about the public women, display of public women during the festival days, how they used to dance and pose in various indecent and absurd way, which the Brahmins advocated as absolute necessity for its religion, was mentioned by him. And then Alexander Hamilton arrived. Alexander Hamilton came to India to earn wealth, as it was conventionally believed in those days that anyone who travel and stayed in India become rich. So he came to India, Odisha, India, and also traveled into Golconda, to Odisha from Golconda. So he mentioned that in the year 1788 he had to travel from Ganjam to Balasore, and during his travel in land, he gave a vivid description of land route in Odisha. He also been to Jagannath temple. He said that in those days, sometime it weather is clear, Jagannath temple used to visible from Manikpatnam. He said that Jagannath temple was stand on a plain area about 1 mile distance from the sea, and there was no mountain or river near that. That is a contradictory because we have different tradition. So this Hamilton also said he spent 1 day and 2 nights near the temple in a guest house. He mentioned about the daily music, ritual as well as the design of temple and idol of Lord Jagannath. He described the idol of Lord Jagannath. He even bribed sometimes Brahmins to enter into the temple, but he was not allowed. He discussed about the origin of Jagannath. He was the first person, I think, who discussed about the origin of Jagannath in his account. He was told when he inquired, he was told that Jagannath was not originally belonged to Puri, where the temple is now. And he also wrote about the rituals, Jagannath temple, from preparation of bhoga to different type of prayers. Then he visited Balasore, and one important thing is that he mentioned about the trade relationship between Balasore and Maldives. Even in the 18th century, he was saying that in the early 18th century, Balasore was doing a pretty good trade with the island of Maldives. He observed that island of Maldives were not producing rice and grain, and they were importing these things and other necessary from Balasore, and return Balasore with importing cowries and chaos. So that in even 18th century there was tradition. So these are all great scholars. So from the discussion we come to know that Greco-Roman notices are mostly reported the geographical location, politics and commercial activity sometime in ancient division of Odisha. The Chinese are concerned with Buddhism as well as the Tibetan, and sometimes with commercial relation. Muslim chroniclers speak about location, commercial activities, and some of them mention about the socio-religious condition of Odisha, like that Amurwali. And finally, the European, from the beginning, are mostly related to Jagannath temple, their account, and socio-religious condition of Odisha. But partially, sometimes they also speak about the political condition of Odisha. So it is no wonder that the traveller were inadequately informed about the geography of Odisha, because they did not know the country as a whole, and in most cases, their staying was also too brief. But there are exceptions like Tavernier, Bernier, and Bowery and Hamilton. They provided beautiful information. So you can say that the foreign traveller account could fearlessly tell the unvarnished truth, but again, they had their limitation because their knowledge of the country and its people were in most cases superficial, and value of their account necessarily depend on the sources of their information. So this is about the foreign sources of Odisha history. So however, to conclude, does not minimize the value of foreign account. As a result, they always remain indispensable. This foreign account always remain indispensable. But what we cannot dispense with it is necessarily infallible. So this is about the foreign account in Odisha. And so far as archaeological sources is concerned, I think Dr. Mohanta is yet to join. If you permit, I can proceed. Otherwise, I may conclude my Dr. Head of the department. Can I proceed or?
Sir, due to
Time constraint.
the time.
Okay, then I am concluding this.
Okay, sir.
Okay, within 2 minutes I am concluding this one. There is not it is not required for me to speak on archaeological resources. So far as sources is concerned, as we know, history is the study of past. So in other words, history is constructed by the remaining fragment of past. Those are the historical sources. That is why Anne Rigney has said that history is after the fact. So historians try to observe the unobservable past through different symbolic representation. No doubt historical evidence is the backbone of history, because without evidence we cannot have any knowledge about the past. So, according to Collingwood, all history is the fruit of a more or less critical or scientific interpretation of evidence. So historians are bound by evidence. So to conclude, I wanted to quote E.H. Carr. He said that history is a continuous process of interaction between the historian and the fact before him. So fact is also otherwise known as sources. With this, I am concluding my topic. Thank you again. Thank you, sir. Thank you, the organizing committee, for giving me this opportunity to speak before you. Thank you, sir. Now I am handing over this to head of the department.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for efforts and themes that you have poured for the writing of the history which are unearthed. Sir, thank you from the Department of History, Raymond Degree College. Is highly indebted to you for your centralization of the depth about the foreign accounts. Sir, so many thanks to you. You have shared your knowledge with us. Thank you, sir. Now, again, I am inviting the resource person, the charming personality who is silent in outlook but possesses prudency and genius. He is the unknown but the well-known young figure, Dr. Manas Kumar Das, Assistant Professor in History, Dinakrishna College, Jodheshwar, Baleshwar, Odisha. Down south with the big thought provoking is the innovative ideas of his personality, servicing in 5 years at Peace and Pitt University, Bhubaneswar, now teaching at Dinakrishna College, Jodheshwar. His personality has given him special impetus college in particular and Odisha in general, as he was proved his mastery over the literary sources. I think his wise dictum on his jurisdiction of his topic may be beneficial of titanic course for the researchers, teachers through today's webinar. Respected Dr. Manas Kumar Das, sir, I would like to request you to present your ideas in this international webinar. Please, sir. Manas, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much. A very good afternoon to one and all present in this international webinar on the sources of the history of Odisha. Esteemed Principal Madam, Ramuna Degree College, Ramuna, Judge Sir, Marathi Madam, Dr. B.K. Mahanta, Dr. Vinay Bihari Satpathy, and my dear participant friends. At the outset, I would like to thank Madam Jayanti Naik, especially to Mr. Jayant Kumar Pradhan and Marathi Madam for inviting me to this august occasion. So it's a great pleasure for me to speak something on this literary sources of the history of Odisha. My topic is literary sources, as I told, literary sources of the history of Odisha.
हेलो हाँ दीदी
Vasanam Bharata Shrestho, Desanam Utkarasya Sramadeso, Desanasti Maistar.
तो
It is written in Kapila Samgita. Well, this wonderful land, having several nominal places like Utkala, Kalinga, Dosari, Hosala, Pangada, Udra, has found place in different literary sources, which helps us in the reconstruction of the history of Odisha. As we all know that literature is the mirror of the society, which reflects the social, political, economic, cultural and religious events of the contemporary period. Several literature has described the glory of Odisha, whereas some have criticized it. For the convenience of understanding, we can divide the literary sources of Odisha history into 3 periods: ancient, medieval and modern. In ancient period, we will go to the Vedic literature. In the period of the earliest strata of Indian literature, like the Vedas, there is no direct reference to Kalinga, Utkala or Udra as such. The origin ascribed to the country of Kalinga is mythical and has a close connection with Rishi Dirghatama, and the story of Dirghatama shows that he was the progenitor of the prince of Kalinga. During the Brahmana period, also Kalinga as such does not appear to have been mentioned anywhere in literature. It is again left more as a matter of inference. Mahagovinda Sutanta mentions a certain king named Satabahu of Kalinga as a contemporary of King Renu of Mithila and King Dhritarashtra of Kasi, who are also mentioned in the Satpatha Brahmana. The Tattreya Aranyaka definitely mentions the Udras. Now let us move to the Puranas. In Chandogya Upanishad, Narada tells Sanat Kumara that knowledge in Itihasa Purana is one of the means to realize the Supreme. The great epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, as well as the Puranas, helps us in the reconstruction of the history of Odisha. The ancient epic Mahabharata refers to this land and its sacred river Vaitarani and goddess Viraja. Says Lomasa advised the Pandavas to go to river Vaitarani to take a holiday in the river and to wash away all their sins. The Mahabharata states, Tato Vaitaranim Gachet Sarva Papo Pramochanim Viraja Khetama Sadhya Virajati Jathasasi. In Harivansa Purana, it has been mentioned that Utkala was the country situated to the west of Bengal and to the south of Gaya, and it is the one of the best, or it is the best state in Bharata. It was mostly a hilly region containing forests. Utkalasya Kala Rajan Vinatasya Paschima Dikpurva Bharata Srishta Gayasya tu Gayapura. From the Puranas, it is known that Utkal country came into existence much before the country of Kalinga. Kurma Purana mentions Kalinga as a breeding place of the best type of elephants. The Puranas mentions Utkala as a son of Dhruva and Illa and grandson of Uttarapada. Another reference of Utkala is found as the name of an Ashura who fought with Indra. The third reference of Utkala is as a son of Kimapurusha, Sudamna and a lord of Dakshinapatha, that is the Utkala kingdom. Utkala is further called as a kingdom of Madhya Desha, noted for Brahmana elephants. Its people were called Utkalas. It is also called a Bindhan tribe. The Tosalas are also called as Bindhan tribe. In Matsya Purana and Pai Purana, the Kalingas are mentioned with Setukas, Musikas, Kumanas, Vanavasikas, Maharashtras, the Maharashtras and the Maharsakas. A few lines later, the Utkalas are mentioned with the Malavas, the Mekalas, the Gozakas, and in the next verse, the Tosalas and Kosikalas are mentioned with the Traipuras, Tumuras, Tumburas, and Nisedas. Tosala, Kosalas Chaiva, Traipura, Vaidikatha, Tumuras Chaiva, Satasura, Nisadasa. The Matsya Purana clearly mentions the orders with the Utkalas. In the Padma Purana, the Kalingas are mentioned twice, one with the Bodhas, the Madras, the Kukuras and the Dasakas, and again in the same chapter with Drosakas, the Kiratas, the Tomaras and the Karabhanjakas. Bodha Madra Kalingascha Kasya Para Kasya Jatharaha Kururasthaiva Sada Sarana Susuttama. The orders are mentioned in the same chapter with Mirachas, the Sarindras of the hillmen, the Kiratas, the Barbarians, the Siddhas, and the Videhas, and Tamarliptikas. So far as Puranas are concerned, Kalinga was a one-known kingdom occupying the geographical position that it did in latter times, and according to one reference in Mahabharata, it was the land of virtue, where dharma or righteousness, like Yudhishthira, had performed a sacrifice or yajna at a particular place which later came to be known as Jagyapura or modern Jajpur. If you go to Ramayana, in Ajatya Kanda of Ramayana, a town named Kalinga Nagara, evidently one of the cities of Kalinga is mentioned, which was situated to the west of Gomad. The Ramayana associates the country of Utkala with Mekada and the Dasana's country. In the Mahabharata, in Adi Parva, narrate a story with regard to the birth of the 5 sons of Bari. Dighatama's begot of the Sudesna 5 sons named Anga, Banga, Kalinga, Pandara and Suma by the law of Levirate. Thus, the country occupied by Kalinga was known as Kalinga. This account of Puranas and the Mahabharata regarding the origin of Kalinga, however, appears more mythical than historical. In Mahabharata, we find Kalinga being referred to on different occasions. The kings are mentioned in Adi Parva and Santi Parva. The king of Kalinga was one of those in the list of the kings invited to join the great Bharata war or the Kurukshetra war on the side of Pandavas. But against the hope of the Pandavas, the Kalingas joined the Kurus with their retinues. It has been recorded that the Kalingas were defeated at different times by Sahadeva, Krishna, Bhima, Sikhandi, etc. The king of Kalinga was placed at the neck of the formation of Garuda Biva under the supervision of Bhisma, and at another time under the supervision of Dronacharya. The Kalinga king also decided to protect Jayadratha when he was about to be killed by Arjuna. The geographical location of the territory occupied by the Kalingas is variously described in different texts. We have a reference to it in the Mahabharata, as I already said, where a well-known passage in the Tirthayatra section of the Bana Parva deals with the description of sacred places of India. Here, from the mouth of the Ganges, Lomasha is said to have pointed out to Yudhishthira the territory of the Kalinga tribe where flows the river Vaitarani. It indicates that at that time, northern limit of the Kalinga country reached the river Ganges and the river Vaitarani flowed through it. Etaha Kalinga Kamteya Jatra Vaitarani. Here is the territory of the Kalinga tribes where flows the river Vaitarani. The Brahma Purana places Kalinga in Madhya Desa, the region lying between the Himalayas and the Vindhya mountain. Again, the same text locates Kalinga in the Dakshina Patha. The Matsya Purana follows the Brahma Purana in describing Kalinga and its places, and places it in Madhya Desa as well as Dakshina Patha. The Mahabharata refers to Dantapura, a famous town of Kalinga, while Uddyaga Purana and Drona Parva mentions Dantapura, which may be taken to be identical with Dantapura of the Buddhist literature. The Markandeya Purana mentions the Kalinga along with the Pulindas, Abhiras, Andhras, Vidarbhas and Kuntalas. South Kosala was originally a part of the kingdom of Kosala of North India, celebrated in the Ramayana. It appears that Kosala was divided into 2 parts from very ancient time. In the 2nd century BC, a powerful dynasty known as the Chedi rose to prominence in the hilly region lying to the west of Kalinga and founded there a new kingdom which has been referred to in the Jaina literature as Chedi Rashtra. The Jaina Harivarsara, on the authority of the early tradition, states that Abhiyendra founded the Chedi Rashtra in the Vindhya region with Puri as the capital. Suktirati Puri was probably the same as Suti Vigraha of Jataka. The Harivansa Purana and the Adi Parva of Mahabharata locate this capital town on the bank of the river Suptimati. This river has been identified with the river Ken by Pragatya, who locates the city of Suttimati in the neighborhood of Banda. So the reference has been made to the Utkalas in the Drona Parva of the Mahabharata, where it is said that Karna conquered the Utkalas for Duryodhana. Now, let us go for the Jaina literature. Dharma Sutra first, a Jaina tradition of very remote period, groups the Kalinga into a class of Eastern Aryans. Similar references have also been made to Kalinga country in the Jaina literature. It is said that Aranatha, the 18th Jaina Tirthankara, received his first alms in the city of Raipura or Rajpura, the metropolis of Kalinga. The Rajpura is referred to the Mahabharata as the capital of Kalinga. Kalinga is grouped with the Dravidas and Vairidas, and its metropolis Kanchanapura was a great center of commerce. Tradition records in Avalakya Sutra inform us that Mahabhira was invited by the king of Kalinga, was a friend of his father, to propagate his doctrine in Kalinga, which was regarded as a stronghold of Jainism. If we go to the Buddhist literature, the Jatakas throw light on the process of Aryanization of Kalinga. The Kalingas are mentioned in the Digha Nikaya, one of the earliest Buddhist works. The Kalinga tribe and their capital city of Dantapura are also referred to in the oldest Sanskrit Buddhist text, Mahabharata. Kalinga Rashtra has been described as one of the 7 political divisions during the time of mythical king Renu. Sarvanva Jataka mentions Kalinga Nagara, a dense forest bordering on Kalinga on the Amarkantak range, in which the Narmada rises and was situated in the western portion of Kalinga. The fact that Kalinga was divided into two kingdoms with capitals at Siddhapura or Kapilapura is indicated by Mahabhansa, and this story finds for corroboration by Tamil work Mani Mekalal. The Anguttara Nikaya, which is regarded as an important source of information, perhaps overlooked Kalinga by not mentioning it in the list of Mahajanapadas, but there are enough evidences provided by the Pali works to prove the existence of Kalinga as a political unit in the 6th century BC and even before. The Mahavastu speak about one king, Ugata of Kalinga Rashtra, ruling from Dantapura. All these Jataka mentions the city of Dantapura for his metropolis of Kalinga. If we go to the secular writings, while describing the costumes and makeup of the people of Bharatavarsha, Natyasastra of Bharata mentioned the Kalingas in the chapter entitled Colors of Different Tribes. It states that Panchalas, Otras, Magadhas, Ahagas, Bahagas and Kalingas should be made dark or deep blue in complexion or Syama in complexion, as it is their color. The reference has been made to the country of Kalinga in the Raghuvansa of Kalidasa. In the Raghuvansa, Kalidasa describes Utkala and Kalinga as two separate kingdoms and states that a river Kapisi, modern Kansai, in Medinapur district formed the northern and southern boundaries of Utkala and Kalinga respectively. That is, Kalinga was to the south of Utkala. He also styles the king of Kalinga as Lord of Mahendra and the seas. Now, in Astadhyayi of Pani, one interesting information about Kalinga has been left by the Astadhyayi of Panini, according to which it was a Janapada with a monarchy. Panini grouped Kalinga together with Anga, Bahaga and Pondra, etc. in his work, and it has been suggested that the boundaries of Kalinga and Magadha touched each other. Panini also records Tatila Kadru or Taitila Janapada was very likely a part of Kalinga. which may be identified with Titlagarh in Balangir district. B.S. Agarwal suggests that Taitilakadu in case of Kalinga would mean some tiny colored material produced in Kalinga, probably rhinoceros heads. In Arthashastra of Kautilya, a book which is written on the polity, also mentions Kalinga in several occasions. The country finds mentioned as one which produces the best type of elephant. Kautilya also refers to the best variety of touchstone of Kalinga with color of green beans. Furthermore, barley scent poisonous root named Kaligaka was a product of the country of Kalinga. In Griyat Samhita of Barahamira, Kalinga of ancient India was also known to this author Barahamira. In his book, he has written the country and its people are mentioned as being under the direct influence of the sun. Some of the rivers of the country are also mentioned in this book. In Gargi Samhita of Mahasi Gargi, an illusion of Satavahana rule is also contained in the Juga Purana section of Gargi Samhita. About the Kalingans, it has been mentioned. In Basyana in its Kamasutra composed towards the end of the 3rd century refers to Kosala, a south person of Odisha, more than once while dealing with the various erotic practices prevalent in different parts of India. He describes its location as bordering on Stri Rajya on a west of Vajravanta Desa. Hiralan identifies the country of Vajravanta with Vairaga in the Chanda district of Maharashtra. Anyway, so we have repeated references to the South Kosala in the Puranas like Markandeya, Brahmana, Vayu, Brahmanda and Matsya, where Kosala and Tosala are always found in pair along with other countries. In the Puranic literature, the country is found to have been placed near Vindhyas adjacent to the Mekala Desa, which is identified with the country comprising Amarkantaka and the adjacent region. Baramara, who flourished in 6th century AD, refers to South Kosala in its Griyat Samhita, as I have already mentioned. So now let us go for the medieval period, particularly to the Gajapati, Suryavanshi Gajapatis. The Gajapati kings were not only the great patrons of learning and literature, but they were also accomplished scholars. The Odia literature, which virtually began with Sara Mahabharata during the reign of Kapilendra Deva, progressed tremendously during the period of subsequent rulers of that dynasty. From that standpoint, the literature of Gajapati period deserves special sentiment. Now let us go for the Sanskrit literature developed during Kapilendra Deva. The Sanskrit literature made its progress during the reign of Kapilendra Deva. He was an accomplished scholar in Sanskrit. His play Parshurama Vijay describes how Parshurama killed Kirata Arjuna. During his reign, Nrsimha Vajpayee composed Kasi Mimamsa and wrote a commentary named Sankhepa Saririka Bhartika on Shankaracharya's work Sankhepa Saririka. Narayana Mishra's commentary on Urva Mimamsa and Uttara Mimamsa of Shankaracharya and his younger brother Jadeshwara's notable work Jadeshwara Paddhati belong to this period. However, scholars are not unanimous on the fact that the works of these two celebrated writers belong to the period of Kapilendra Deva. Sanskrit literature during Purushottam Deva's monumental work, Abhigyana's Gita Govinda, that contained 800 slokas, was a kavya of no mean order. Some scholars give credit to Lord Dibakara for the composition of Abhigyana Gita Govinda. Purushottam Deva also composed Namavaita,
Start କରୁଛୁ। Thank you. Dr. Manas Kumar Das. Am I audible to you? Manas sir. Am I audible to you? Sir, I have one question, sir. Are you want to continue your talk? Assistant Professor Manas sir? Manas sir? Am I audible to you, sir?
Unmute. Please unmute him.
Yes, I'm audible. You are audible, sir. Yes.
Please conclude your talk within few time. We will stop here.
Okay. So, in Sanskrit literature, during Prataprudradev, the last Gajapati king of Odisha, was a great poet, and his Saraswati Vyasam, Kautika Chintamani, Nirnaya Sangraha, and etc. were prevalent literary creations of that period. So many things I have to tell, but due to the constraint of time, I am not able to speak more things. Odia literature during the Kapilendra Deva, particularly Saradas, the contribution of Saradas was illuminating that the literary works produced during that time were known as the literature of Sara Juga. So it is a magnum opus of his creation. Then different Panchashakhas, Balaram Das, Jagannath Das, then Jaswanta Das, Shishu Ananta Das. So all these writers have, the Panchashakhas have revolutionary, the writings of these authors were revolutionary in nature. So regarding the Muslim writers, already some writers have been mentioned by Vinod sir, and I think I should not go for that. The modern period, among the important Persian sources, he has already mentioned some of them. In the pre-colonial period, he has also mentioned. Regarding the Madhara Panji with all its limitations is an attempt at writing the history of Odisha, and so also the Chakra copies of the latter time. Among interesting accounts of dynastic history of Odisha, mention may be made of the Ganga Bhansam Charitam of Vasudeva Ratha, then Jayachandrika Prahlad Dubey written in 1780, Bhanja Masabai of Bursur of Sujamani Chapatnaik written in 1830, and two works on the Bhanjas of Mayurvansh and the Bhanja Vansha Maika Ragopura Vansanu both have unknown authorship written in 1801 and 1807 respectively. So after the British occupation of Odisha, Andrew Sterling, who came to India in 1813 to work as the personal secretary to the government of India, wrote an admirable work entitled An Account, Geographical, Statistical and Historical of Odisha proper or Cuttack, which is published in the Aesthetic Society Researches in 1825. Sterling was doing further research on the history of Odisha. Another famous Orientalist who did valuable research on Odisha was John Williams, who was for some time the collector of Baleshwar and also the commissioner of Odisha division. He was a contemporary of W. W. Hunter and worked mostly on philology and Buddhist remains in Odisha. The historical works of Hunter, Sterling and Williams have been edited by Dr. N. K. Sahu. Anyway, so during the latter part of the 19th century, Indian scholars like Rajendralal Mitra, Manmohan Chakraborty, Barrymohan Acharya and have made remarkable contributions to the study of Odisha history. The monumental work of R. L. Mitra, Antiquities of Odisha in 2 volumes, And Karimon Acharya is Utkala Itihasa. He was the first Odia scholar to write the Odisha history, which is published in 1879, and it was approved as a textbook in the secondary schools in Odisha. Manmohan Chakraborty and J. Flint made scientific research on the epigraphic sources available by that time, and their work published in Journal of Asiatic Society formed an authentic basis for the research on the history of Odisha. Flint edited copperplate the inscriptions of early Somasi kings and made attempts to determine the chronology, while M.M. Chakraborty edited and analyzed the copperplate records of the Eastern Ganga kings. The brilliant work of Chakraborty on the chronology of the Eastern Ganga kings of Odisha, published in the Journals of Asiatic Society in 1903, with the opening of the 20th century, the study of Odisha history and culture made rapid progress through monumental works, archaeological survey of monuments by N.N. Basu and Odisha and the Remains by Manmohan Ganguly were published in 1911 and 1912 respectively. Works on history of Odisha was written in Odia in traditional lines, were found in Prachina Utkala by Jagabandhu Singh, Utkala Itihas by Prabhasandhu Mishra, published in 1920, etc. So, as I am telling that I am running after time, so let me conclude that the literature shows ancient, medieval and modern period gives a wide range of knowledge regarding the social, political, economic, religious and cultural life of the people of Odisha. The conclusion is however irresistible that various references to Kalinga, Motra, Utkala, Tosar, etc. clearly indicate that these territories were well known and recognized as separate units and had some sort of interstate relationship with other political units of the country. So thank you, Jan sir, for giving me an opportunity. Thank you all.
Thank you, Assistant Professor Dr. Manas Kumar Das sir. Credit goes to you for interpretation and presentation by citing the examples of literary evidences, which is minor knowledge for out of the ages, which forms part and parcel of the history. So many thanks to you sir. Your mind-blowing talk has talked to us and given us immense pleasure and perpetual encouragement about the literary success of history. Thank you, sir. Now, Professor Manas sir, one question to you, sir.
Okay.
So, from by Govahari Jena sir of Baba Panchaleshwar College, are the Brahminical literature authentic sources for writing history?
See sir, things that literature already we know that history is based on facts only, and literature is fiction. Something whatever happening in the society is reflected in the literature, but we cannot trust totally to the literature part. We can draw inferences, we can draw some historical facts from that, as because there is no such description regarding the dates, regarding the historical fact. So we cannot totally depend upon the literature part, but we can correlate the different aspects of the literature or of different periods, that this thing might have happened, and we can correlate it to other authentic parts of history.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Okay, sir. Now I'm going to request C, who kindles the academic fire in the heart of the college. She is our departmental madam, Mr. Smarati Samuel. She is well known for her lucid and charming personality, whose service is praiseworthy for needs all times to come. Dear Madam and my colleague, you are requested to offer the vote of thanks to participants, speakers, resource persons and guests and our staffs. Please, Madam.
When educating the minds of youth, we must not forget to educate their heart. With these immortal lines of Dalai Lama, I, revered principal, respected guests, learning participants, and lovers of today's webinar, it is immense pleasure and privilege for me to offer the vote of thanks to the guests shown on the screen. At the outset, I offer my heartfelt thanks to our beloved principal, Mrs. Janti Naik Madam, who gave her wholehearted support for concluding the seminar. Her right advice in right time will definitely encourage the lecturers and students for academic needs. I extend my sincere thanks to Dr. Basant Kumar Mahanta sir. Then my sincere gratitude is due to the initiator Dr. Vinod Bihari Sarvati sir, the resource persons of the webinar, for his analyzing of the foreign accounts, which is a heap of knowledge stored in foreign minds. His synthesis and the webinar a grand success. Wish you a wonderful and COVID-free year ahead. Advance Happy New Year. Thank you all and have a nice day.
Hello. The webinar is ended here with, and I pray to Almighty Lord Jagannath to have a happy and similar for bright and prosperous New Year 2021. Thank you all forever and ever. Yes, sir. Already link has shared in chat. Feedback already shared in chat box. Then it is my earnest request from the History Department, Ramana Degree College, if anyone want to listen the Professor Basant Kumar Mahanta from Africa is about his topic, please call me or write me. I will send a recording of the Basant sir near you. Because due to technical issues and online issues, he did not join with us. So it is my request, please anyone interested to listen about the topic regarding archaeological of Professor Basant Kumar Mahanta sir, please phone me or write me in group. I will share the records of Professor Basant sir. Thanks forever and ever.